We are on page Chaf Dalet Amud Aleph, 24a2, if you're following in the art scroll. Rabbi Yehuda Nesi'ah Gazar Taanita. Rabbi Yehuda, the Nasi. So who's Rabbi Yehuda Nasi? He is the one that arranged the Mishnah. He comes from the Davidic lineage he comes from King David. He's part of the Nasi of Am Yisrael. Gazar Taanita. He instituted a Taanit because they didn't have rain. By Rachamim, they prayed and they asked for mercy. V'lo ati mitra, and nothing came. Amar, he said, Kama ika mishmul haramati liYehuda ben Gamliel. Look at the difference between Shmuel Haramati. Who's Shmuel Haramati? He's the prophet Shmuel, who was the one that anointed King David, his great-great-great-grandfather. LiYehuda ben Gamliel, to Yehuda ben Gamliel, who's that? That's himself. Oy lo ledor sheken nitkar. Woe is to the generation that is stuck in this situation. Oy lo lemi she'alta bi'amav kach. Woe is to a person, Hazit, the guy that had something like this happen, to him. That Rabbi Yehuda could ask for rain and not be answered. So woe is to the person, woe is to the generation, he's saying, that has such a leader. Chalash da'ateh, he unfortunately, he felt terrible, he felt so bad, he almost sounds like he was depressed, he was upset. Ve'ata mitra, and the rain came because of the way that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi felt. Now to me, that says something very important. What it says is that maybe he could not bring the rain on demand because of the gezerah that was taking place at the time. Maybe he was unable to do so with his prayers. But it's clear that even if in Shamayim they did not want to listen to his tefillot, they were not willing to have him be upset. And I found that really, really interesting. And we'll see soon, I think we'll see the story of Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. And if not, please remind me to come back to the story of Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, because I have an interesting diuk that I think matches that concept over here as well. Okay, let's move on. The Ben Nisi'ah Gazar Ta'anita, the house of the Nasi. What do you mean when we say the house of the Nasi? We mean the every Nasi, the princes of Israel were the non-king era equivalent of a king. So in an era when they did not have a king, so what did they have? They had an Av Betin, a person who was in charge of the Betin, and then he had a counterpart, which was the Nasi, was the prince. Both of them were tremendous rabbis. In fact, this period was called, in Judaism, it was called the era of the Zugot, of the pairs, of the twins, okay? When are we introduced to the twins, the two leaders, two-pronged leadership that ruled the Jewish people? We experience it in the beginning of Pirkei Avot. It says, Yossi ben Yoezer, right? And this one, Yochanan ish Tzreda, and it tells you, Kiblu mehem. Hillel and Shammai was an example of the Nasi and the Av Bedin. Okay, one of them is the Nasi, one of them is the Av Bedin. Both of them are tremendous Torah scholars, but they play different roles in terms of the community and in terms of what they do. Okay? The Ben Nisi'ah, so the house, the court of the Nasi, Gazar Ta'anita, they decreed, they said that there's going to be a fast because of the fact that they didn't have enough rain and it was going to cause a famine. But they just did not manage to get the word out to the great two scholars who lived at that era of Rabbi Yohanan and Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish was Rabbi Yohanan's protege, but also his brother-in-law. Litzafra Odiinu. So what happened? The next morning, they told them that they made the day fast. Rish Lakish said to Rabbi Yochanan, Halo kabilna alan miurta. We did not accept this fast yesterday in the evening. Amale anan batrayu grarinan. We're dragged after them. So what does that mean that we're dragged after them? Let's look for 1 second at Rashi. Rashi says, where's Rashi? Look, sorry. Gararinan, you see it's about right way in the middle of the page. Girurin umishuchin anu acharehem. We are dragged and pulled after the court of the Nasi. You see Rashi midway through? Ukimi, Garina.
Yes.
Right there?
Yeah.
You see it? Midway through the Rashi? Ukemi shekabilnu kablinu alayu. It's as if we accepted it upon ourselves. What are they talking about? What is this? What is this idea? When we accept a fast, we already explained earlier that a person might fast and not know that it's a fast. Does that count as a fast? Person finds out midway through. No, you weren't fasting for the sake of fasting, so therefore it doesn't count as if it was a fast. When does a fast count as a fast? You could have a guy fast and he doesn't even realize. You're hardworking. You have a bunch of appointments. A lot of times it could go where I realize 4:00 in the afternoon. I'm so hungry. What's going on? I realize, I didn't have lunch. I didn't have breakfast. I didn't have dinner. So all of a sudden you realize that. That's not a fast. That's just a busy guy. Okay. So you can't claim teshuvah. You can't claim like I fasted for something when it happened without you even noticing. So in order to make sure that that's the case, a fast is only counted when you accept it the day before at mincha. You say that tomorrow I'm going to fast, and this is true about a fast which is not a public fast. A public fast that doesn't have that halakha, but a private fast or a temporary fast you have to accept it before. So Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish said to his master, Rabbi Yochanan, it doesn't count that we fasted, right? Why? Because we didn't know that we were fasting. Rabbi Yochanan explains. He said, no, since they're the house of the Nasi, and when they decree it on the public, it's as if every single person accepted it upon themselves, and therefore, And therefore, our fast also counts. And we'll see exactly what that means in just a minute, because in terms of the knowledge on the personal level of that person, it doesn't make a difference that they instituted it. I didn't know I was fasting, so how could that count? But the answer is that the court of the Nasi has such a koach, such a power, that they make a private temporary fast as instituted as a complete fast. And therefore, with or without acceptance, it still carries on. Okay, let's move on. Same thing happened. But the rain did not come. Okay? Tana lohu Oshia Zeira Dimin Chavraya. So Oshia, the Zeira means the young one, the small one. Oshia Zeira said Dimin Chavraya from the youngest of the group, right? What did he say? He quoted to them a Tana, a Braita. And the Braita says as follows. Right? What happens if a mistake happened and it was hidden from Enei Ha'edah, the eyes of the people? Who are the eyes of the people? That refers to the Bet Din. Okay? So the Bet Din made a mistake in a ruling, and that caused the people to do a avon. They ruled on something incorrectly. The people then did what the Bet Din said, but now you have all the Jewish people did a shogeg because they were following the Bet Din. Okay? So this is a pasuk in the Torah. So over there, we refer to the Bet Din as the eyes of the tzibur. Mashal lekala, this is compared to a kala, shehi bebet avia, kozman she'enei hayafot, when she's still in the house of her father, so long as her eyes are beautiful, en kol gufa tzricha b'dika. We don't need to check the rest of her body. Enei trutot, but if her eyes seem weak, kol gufa tzricha b'dika. We have to check the rest of her body as well. What are we talking about? We're talking about an idea that at the time someone would meet a prospective bride in the house of her father, and they would want to figure out if this person is healthy or not. So one of the signs for health, I don't know if it's interesting if people don't realize this. One of the first thing a doctor does when he does a checkup is takes that thing, he looks in your eyes. What is he doing? He's not looking to see if you have macular degeneration. He's not looking to see if you need glasses. But there's many different things that a doctor can tell and notice just by looking in the eyes of a patient. If the eyes are bloodshot, if they're yellow, right? These things, the yellowness in the eyes can indicate something that has nothing to do with the eyes. It can indicate that the person has hepatitis. It can indicate that a person, issues of diabetes. Can be many different things can be seen in the eyes. So the Gemara was already telling you 2,000 years ago that for what a person should know, they should know if they look in the eyes and the eyes are weak, that they need to, before they go forward with the shidduch, they should check out the girl, the rest of her body, because she might not be well, or she might not even know that she's unwell. But if her eyes are strong, then you have much less to worry about in the rest of the body. So too, what are we comparing it to? so too, the Einei Ha'edah, if Sanhedrin is the eyes of the people, so if the eyes are healthy, then you know as well that the people don't need to be looked at so carefully. Masha'en ken, if the Sanhedrin is a problem, right? If the Sanhedrin decrees something, and we don't see that their decrees are coming to fruition, so if the Sanhedrin is deficient, then we could also know that there's problems with with the people. Let's carry on.
With the people or with the Sanhedrin?
Sorry?
There are problems with the people or with the Sanhedrin?
Both ways.
Oh.
Both ways. Sorry?
He seems to be criticizing the court of the Nasi. To the Nasi or someone in the court.
Yes.
A little bit, no? He's telling you not worthy of the rain coming.
What he's saying is, that that's already, you see that from the Pasuk.
No, he's bringing pasuk to shamble the guy.
No, he's bringing the Pasuk to say that the Torah considers you this.
Right.
And since the Torah considers you this, the Einei Ha'edah, it's not a positive or negative thing. Since the Torah considers you the eyes of the Edah, so if I can look into if the eyes are not operating properly, then that's going to be a problem, and it illustrates there's going to be a problem for the body as well. But you're the eyes of the Edah. If your fast is not working, there's something you need to fix in the Sanhedrin. Now, by the way, where else do we find this? Moshe Rabbeinu asks Yitro to stay with the Jewish people and to be a leader for them. And what does he say to him? V'hayita lanu la'enayim, and you will be for us as eyes. He's also making the same point. So here, in Rev Oshia, the youngest of the people in the Hamurah, he was the one that pointed it out. Now, I was wondering to myself, right, was that I was wondering to myself if there's a reason why the Torah, the Gemara is pointing out Oshia's status. I think maybe that goes to what Morris is speaking about. So let's look at the Gemara again. Remember, what's the mashal? The mashal is if you look at this girl and you see in her eyes that she's strong, that she's healthy, then the body doesn't need to be checked. But if the eyes are unwell, right, then you got to check the body. So he's communicating not only that there's a problem in the eyes, but he's also communicating that because there's a problem in the eyes, right, therefore the Jewish people are being checked, so to speak, by God and found wanting. But if the Sanhedrin was strong enough, then the body would not have had to be checked, like in the example. So he's really communicating both ideas, that the Sanhedrin is found wanting, and also that because they're found wanting, now that's why the Jewish people are experiencing this problem. Healthy eyes could have protected us, could have saved us from this, is what he's saying. And I think maybe the reason why the Gemara is pointing out that he was the youngest of the group is it's illustrating perhaps that this is not a comment that anyone else would have said in public. Perhaps because it was unsavory, but he was young. He didn't yet know the social norms of doing it. Yes, Mars.
I have another theory.
Yeah.
He was young. Even the youngest guy who doesn't know a lot knows this baraita. Even the youngest guy knows, hey, you got to look inside your house and make sure that you're okay because your prayers aren't being answered.
Beautiful. I like that idea. And it's illustrating that even he would say, I have one problem with that. Generally, we find in the Talmud that the younger people did not speak in front of the older people, unless the older people were not ready to or were not speaking. So that's when the younger person would pipe up, because they respected that they were lower down on the food chain because of their age and because of their experience. So the idea that everyone realized this, and he was just the one that said it, maybe perhaps, that's also not, okay, let's carry on, okay? Anyway, so this is the story that happened. He issues this, he fires the salvo, okay? Wonderful. Atu avade viramila sudra b'tzavare. They came to the Bet Midrash. They threw sudra. Sudra literally means like a cloth around his neck. V'kamitzarele, and they started hurting him.
Strangling the guy.
Yeah. Now, I kind of feel like if they were strangling him, the lashon of the Gemara would not be kamitza'arule, that they were hurting him. If they were trying to strangle him to death, then the Gemara would say, and they were killing him or they were choking him. Kamitza'arule, they were roughing him up for making statements like that about the house of the Nasi.
To Morris's point, it was like a ayib item, like they would.
Number one, it wasn't ayib. Also, the other people understood that they were not going to get away. They knew what would happen if they. Okay, Amru luhu b'nei mate. The people of the place came to them and they said, "Shavke, leave him alone. Dehanami mitza'ar lan. This guy also kills us the same way. Kivan dechazinan dechol mili lishum shamayim." But once we see that this guy, everything he does is for the sake of Shamayim, he really means it in the best possible way. Lo amri le'midi v'shavkina le. We don't say anything anymore to him, right? Atu nami shavku. You also, leave him alone. This guy is not a guy who's a troublemaker. He's not a guy who's trying to start anything. He's a emet guy. And therefore, when he drives us crazy and he, tells us off, we've already learned from our own experience that he's legit, and therefore we leave him alone. You also should leave him alone. Now it's interesting, by the way, because now we see these words kamitza'arule, right? You see that? They began hurting him, and what's that talking about? They took a cloth and they put it around his neck. So whatever they were doing to him was very unpleasant. If you go back now, you remember the son of Rabbi Yossi ben Yukras. Remember when he went past his father's grave? Right? And he begged his father, he said, please, these people, Amrele Abba. He said of the Ben Nisi'ah, the people of the court. Remember back on page Chav Gimel Amud Bet. He said, Father, Hani Mitzarule. They're harassing me, they're bothering me. And what happened? They were walking by with their horses, and the horses became frozen to the spot. They couldn't move, they couldn't walk. Right? Until they said, we're never going to do it again. So he uses the same word, kamitzarule. It doesn't mean that they were, they were making fun of him. Kamitzarule means that they were physically harassing him. Okay, starting up with him. Because you see the same word is being used in both cases. Okay. Now, what's interesting to me, by the way, is that the Gemara over here does not say that that was the Ben Yisi'ah. It says, Atu Avadeh, the servants. The goons. So you don't know that the Ben Nisi'ah actually said to do this. Right? You just know these are the servants. Maybe they're acting out. Whereas in the first story, it doesn't say Avadeh de Ben Nisi'ah. It says de Ben Nisi'ah. Okay? So if you're paying close attention, you'll notice that there's slight discrepancies in each story. And I think the Gemara is speaking that way so you understand there's a difference between this story and that one. Okay. Rabbi Gazar Taanita. Rabbi had a set of fasts. So who's Rabbi? Same person. Rabbi Yehuda Nesiyah. V'lo ata mitra. Nachit kame Ilfa. Ilfa then came in front of him to pray. Okay, and he prayed in front of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. V'amri le Rabbi Ilfe. And some people say it was Rabbi Ilfai that went instead of Ilfa. Those are two different people. Amar, he said, Mashiva Ruach v'nashav Zika. He said, let the winds blow, and what happened? The wind blew. Morida Geshem, let the rains fall, v'ata mitra, and the rains came. Amale, Rebbe said to him, so Rabbi Yehuda Nasi that failed at bringing the rains, says either to Ilfa or Rabbi Ilfai, my ovadach, what do you do that you answered like this? Amale, he said to him, Dayarna bekusta dchika. I live in a place where nobody has anything. Dilet becham lekiddush v'avdalta, and they don't have wine for kiddush and avdalah. Tarachna ve'atina chamrad lekidusha. I work hard and I bring wine for kiddush v'avdalta and avdalah, and I make kiddush and avdalah for the people. Umafekna lehu yidei chovatayu, and I fulfill their obligations by bringing them wine for kiddush and avdalah, and just for the sake of kiddush and avdalah, he had the zechut that when he said Mashiva Ruach, the rain came, the wind came. Morida Geshem, the rain came. By the way, there's actually a very famous process now that goes on. It's called Chai Reutel. I don't know if you've ever seen this before. Very weird and very wild. I never understood what it meant. They say that you should donate for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai 18 rotel of wine, And I always thought to myself, why do I got to give wine to that guy? Like, what's the point? He's good. He's buried, big tzaddik in Gan Eden. Well, because you want to drink wine at his kever, I have to pay, and that's tzedakah, and that's a zechut. The answer is this Gemara. All these people are coming to pray. When do they come to pray? They come there, Motzei Shabbat, they're there. People need to make Havdalah, or they need to make Kiddush.
Fantastic.
So if you're donating Kiddush wine to people who don't have Kiddush wine, now where do you find today people that don't have Kiddush wine? You find in the kotel, by the way, on a Saturday night, everyone goes to pray. Now they need Havdalah. Where do they get Havdalah at the kotel? At the back of the kotel, there's people that sponsor Havdalah, and Friday night and Shabbat morning, there's people who sponsor Kiddush. A guy's going to leave the kotel, he doesn't have Kiddush. So you sponsored wine for Kiddush and Havdalah. What is the chut that is? You see from this Gemara, what Ilfa and Rav Ifai was able to do with sponsoring, with bringing them Kiddush and Havdalah and being motzi them, Yedeh Hovatay. Okay, yes. Rav Ikla Leahu Atra. Rav went to a certain place, okay, Lahu Ata, to that place. Gazar Taanit, velo ata mitra. He decreed that there should be a fast and didn't come. Nachit kameh shlicha d'tzibura. A hazan, a shaliach tzibur, went to the teva. Amar mashiv haruach v'nashav zika. Amar morid hageshem v'ata mitra. Amale my ovadach. Exact facsimile of the last story. Rav happens to be a student of Rabbi Yehuda, so it's even more synonymous. Amale, he said, Mikri dar de kiana. I'm somebody who teaches little children, how to read. Umakrena lebnei aniye kibnei atire. And I teach the ones of the poor in the same way that I teach the ones of the rich. Now today, that doesn't sound like a big deal. Because you know what? If you're a teacher in school and you treat the rich kids different than you treat the poor kids, you're an abomination. Right? Everyone looks at a rabbi, at a rebbe, at a teacher like that in the school today, and you think, what kind of horrible person is this? That if the kid has the right last name, you treat him well. If the kid has the wrong last name, you treat him not well. This is not in a school. This is talking about back in the day when if you wanted your kid to study with a melamed, you paid the melamed for his time to study with your son. So you were getting paid not by a school for a class, you're getting paid piecemeal for each child. You take on a kid that's a poor kid, that comes at the expense of a salaried post. The guy needs the money to feed his children. So this is not as important, as relevant perhaps in today's society as it was back then. But back then, he said, I treat the children of the poor, I teach them even the same exact way as I teach the rich. How do I know this is the case? Because look at the next line that he says. And anyone that can't pay, lo shakirna mine midi, I don't take a dime from them. So I'm spending the time learning with them, and I'm doing it for free. The itli pira de kavre. Not only that, I have as a side hustle, I have pira de chavre, which means I grow. I have like a fish farm. Okay, v'choman de pasha meshachidna leminayu, and anyone that does the wrong thing, is misbehaving, I bribe them. Meshachidna leminayu. I take a fish from my own fish pond and I bribe the guy to study with some food. Umisadrina. By the way, could you imagine? Imagine telling a kid today, come to shul, you don't get an Xbox, you get a fish. And I sort things out, and I appease him, I get him to feel good about himself, until he's ready to come down and read together with everybody else. Unbelievable, what a great rabbi, what a special person. You see a person like that, that person was capable of sorting out that the rain should come literally on demand.
Isn't this, can I interrupt?
Sure.
Aren't these stories an indictment of Rebbe and Rava?
Excellent question.
They're great rabbis.
I love the lawyer in you always comes out, he's defending the clients, I love it. But you know what the answer is? The answer is actually very simple. We already experienced a scenario where you had 3 rabbis, if you remember, right? Remember, one of them had the highest level, one of them had a middle level, one of them had the least. And each rabbi felt bad that he was not on the level of the guy on top of him.
Right.
And on each one of them, they were told or shown in a dream, don't worry, you're still great because you have this. The fact that a person has one specific thing which gets them a specific zechut doesn't mean that I don't have areas in which I myself am much bigger than them in that other area. So as an example, if you try and compare the zechut of Torah of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi to this guy, to the guy who gives out wine for Kiddush and Havdalah, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi gave us the Mishnah. So 2,000 years of Torah learning is going to come from him. Now, 2 points I want to make. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, who spent his life arranging and codifying the Mishnah, it reminds me of a line one of my students told me. He said, you know, what's crazy to think, Rabbi, is that the majority of your students may not have even been born yet. You're recording all the Torah, putting it out there. So let's say you have 5,000 people, 10,000 people that you taught, 100,000 people you taught. Over the fullness of time, you might have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who studied the Torah that you put out there. And I am a drop in the ocean compared to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi is telling us this story while he's alive. He hasn't accumulated the fruits of his labor yet. Go try and measure Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi now against Ilfa. He invested in a long-term strategy. It's very different. Rav was instrumental in beginning the process of the Gemara. Same investment. So that's answer for Rabbi Yehuda and Rav. But a wider answer, even not in terms of zechut, is also that certain things are dependent on certain zechuyot. So let's say, as an example, I'm the president of the United States. I don't have the time to go make Kiddush and Havdalah in the poor town. You know why? Because I'm running the issues of state. If I was to decide for myself after hearing this story, you know what? I don't have the zechut of bringing the rain on demand. From now on, I'm going to do Kiddush Havdalah in Harlem. I'm going to go to the underprivileged area. I'll make Kiddush Havdalah. You know what my staff will tell me? You don't have the time to do this. You have a different job. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi had a different job with different zechuyot. But when it comes to this specific thing, the idea of bringing rain, right? This was something that was connected to acts of great chesed and kindness, which are specifically limited. We had another example of this with Mar Ukva, if you remember. Mar Ukva, mikarvi ahaniyata. We had a different answer, a different example also in the Gemara 2 pages ago. He gives money to the aniyim, and they have to go shopping and buy the food with the money. But his wife gives them food directly from the pots. Right. So who has a bigger zechut? The wife, because they're able to eat the food right away. Yeah, but who could give more tzedakah? Mar Ukva. So you see, on the one level, this mekar v'haniyata. Now, go tell Mar Ukva, you know something? Your wife has a bigger zechut. Leave the bit midrash. Stop giving checks out to people and make hamud. You know who doesn't want that? The aniyim don't want that. Because the ani would rather get the check than meatballs. Happens to be that with regards to the act of chesed and the way you made this person feel in this moment, you brought him the hana'ah of eating the meatball when he was hungry. So you have that zechut. Not only that, I would add one last piece to this. What was the zechut of these people? That they were able to do something in the immediate term. They said Mashiach Baruch came. Could be with Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, also Mashiach, the Matzi Mitra, the rain would come, just not right now, not immediately. Mekarvi Ahniyata, making Kiddush and Havdalah for someone, engaging with the child on the spot, getting him the fish, bringing him to the immediacy of the way in which they did chesed resulted in the immediacy in which they were answered. But that doesn't mean that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi or Rav would not have been answered, just in a measure which was appropriate to their zechut, which was not something that took place in an immediate sense. Yom Achad, the Gemara gives one more example of this concept. Yom Achad, Shmaya de Kagaris, Shameh de Kagaris. One day, he overheard.
1 second, where are you?
I lost you.
I think you went to the wrong place.
1 second.
24A4.
24.
Rav Nachman.
Ad Ati Vikare.
Rav Nachman.
Sorry, yeah. Sorry, Rav Nachman, Rav Nachman, Gaza Taanit. Rav Nachman instituted a fast in the same way. He asked for mercy and it didn't come. Amar Shaklua le Nachman. He said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, take Nachman. Kill me. You know, you're not going to answer my tefillot? Take my neshama. Havoto min guda le'ara. And throw him right? From Guda, from the wall, le'ara to the ground. Chalash da'ateh, he felt so terrible, right? About this, that he wasn't answered. Ve'ata mitra, and the rain came. So again, his tefillah was not answered, but his upsetness, his depression was. We'll come back to this again soon. Rabba gazar tanita, Rabba also decreed a fast. Bayracham evloati mitra. Amrule, they said, V'harav Yehuda, ki havagazar tanita ata mitra. The people told Rabba, what kind of rabbi are you? When Rav Yehuda did this, he did the Taanit and the rain came. How come you can't do the same? Amalahu, my avid, what should I do? Imishum tenuye. If you think, right, that it's because of learning, anan adfinan minayu. We're better than him. I know more Torah than him. Dibishne de Rav Yehuda, because during the time of Rav Yehuda, kol tenuye, b'nezikin, all of the teachings that are in the Masechtot of Nezikin. Nezikin is Baba Metzia, Baba Kama, Baba Batra, okay, et al. Ve'anan kamatnitan b'shita sidrin. When he taught Torah, they taught only the teachings of Nezikin. But when I was in charge, we taught all of the Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, because I knew all of the 6. V'chiavimati Rav Yehuda be'uktzin, and Rav Yehuda would reach the Masechet of Uksin, okay? Ha'isha shekoveshet yerek bekedera, when a woman is pickling a vegetable in a pan. Ve'amri le zetim shekavshan betarfehen teorin. And some people say that in a different Mishnah, which tells you about the halacha, that when someone is pickling the olives betarfehen, along with the surrounding foliage that's connected to the olives, tehorin, that's tahor. Amar havayot Rav Shmuel kachazin hacha. I see over here havayot, the questions, the answers of Rav Ushmuel. Okay, Rav and Shmuel, they would go back and forth in clarifying the halacha. Ve'anan kamatninan beuksin tlesar mativta. But when it came to my reign of teaching Torah, right, we would teach over the Masechtot of Uksin in 13 different yeshivot. Okay? Vilu Rav Yehuda. So in other words, with him, they had to go to the questions of Rav and Shmuel to answer the questions. With us, we have it in 13 different places. Vilu Rav Yehuda ki avishalif chad mesana. And when Rav Yehuda would take off one of his shoes, he would show that he was in pain, he was in difficulty. Ati mitra, the rain would come. Ve'anan katzavchinan kuli yoma, but I could scream all day long. Ve'lekad ashkachban, and no one's listening to me. Imishum uvada, if it is because of my actions. I'ika dechaza midi, if there's someone who can see there's something I'm doing wrong, please dachilak, tell me, and I'll do it. You understand? So he's saying, wow. I don't know what to answer you. I see the fact that when Rabbi Yehuda takes off one shoe, like to go barefoot, already the rains come. He utters one word, Hashem answers him. And with me, and it can't be because of the Torah, because actually the Torah under me is actually stronger than it was when it was under Rabbi Yehuda. So if there's something that's afoul with my actions, let me know. I'll try and fix it. Aval ma yasu gedolei ador. She'en doran domeh yafeh. What should the leaders of a generation do if their people are not on the same level? Ooh. So he's throwing down the gauntlet.
He's saying it's your fault.
Now remember, they're coming to him and saying, you're not as good as Rav Yehuda. And he's saying, the difference is not between me and Rav Yehuda. I'm actually bigger than Rav Yehuda. The difference must be in the people of Rav Yehuda. And maybe you don't deserve that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu should answer my prayers on your behalf. Look, he gives us, you can't come and foul and then cry when the other guy, right? They said to him.
Is he allowed, God forbid, but like, is he allowed to say that? Like, isn't it, I also just to say that, like, it's not about the people, but also I'm bigger than Rabbi Yehuda and like all this, it's like. He's
correcting the misassumption, if you will, that the problem here was him. and the people would never change if they thought that the problem was him. Right? They would not get the rain by blaming him for their problems. And he said, so you know what? In Torah, I'm bigger. If there's something that I'm doing that's incorrect and I don't know about it, please let me know. So he's not saying I'm not inviting criticism.
It's about clarity.
You tell me what I'm doing wrong. But as far as I can see, from where I'm standing, in Torah, I'm bigger. In deeds, let somebody come if they have something to say. Fad, I'll take the floor. But, speak now, forever hold your peace. Because if you have nothing to say to me, then the only remaining possibility is you. Okay. Rav Yehuda Chazanu Betre. Rav Yehuda saw two people. Davu kapartzi birifta. Okay? They were throwing around bread. Amar, he said, Shma mina ika sava ba'alma. I see that there's too much food in the world that people could throw bread around as if it's a toy. Yahiv ene havikafna. He looked at these people and instantly a famine began brewing in the community. The rabbi said to Rav Kana, who was the son of Rav Nechunya, who was the attendant of Rav Yehuda. They said, Mar d'shchiach kameh, you, Rabbi, you're there with him all the time. Ni'asaye de lepak bepitcha de samuch leshuka. Let him go. Take him, make sure that you figure out a way to get him to the doorway next to the shuk, because he lived near the shuk. Let him gaze on the shuk, and he'll see how bad the situation is. He decreed that there should be a famine so that people should appreciate the produce that they had. Let him see now how little produce there is in the marketplace. Maybe he'll change and he'll pray that it should go away. Chazak Nufya, he saw a crowd of the big group of people there, a crowd of people. Amar lehu, my hai. What's going on? Amrule, they said, Akuspa de tamri kaimi de kamizdavan. They're waiting very soon. The guy is bringing supply chain issues. The guy is bringing a box of dates, and when he brings the box of dates, everybody here is going to fight to be able to buy it. Amar, he said, Shma mina kafna be'alma. Wow, I see from here how bad the famine is in the world. Amar le'lishmaye. He said to his gabai, his attendant, Rav Nechunya, Shlofli misanai, take off my shoes. Shalaf le'echad misana. He took off one shoe, mitra, and it started raining outside. You see the level of these tzaddikim is just not to be believed. I always think to myself, how did they sin? How did they sin back then? When you go to a tzaddik like this, you take off one shoe, he controls the weather, the famine, because he says a word, he takes off his shoe, had that, God forbid, bar minan, the guy goes to Foot Locker. And he tries on shoes, there's famines, there's plagues, it's a disaster. I don't understand. I don't understand how they were unable to see. And then look in the Sifrei Musar, you know what the Sifrei Musar say? That when the miracles were abundant, the Yetzer Hara was given a much stronger power to counteract the elements of Midah. So they knew the truth, but the power of the Yetzer Hara, he was literally unleashed. So that their Yetzer Hara was as powerful as the knowledge that they would see of these miracles. Kimata lemishlav achrina, when he reached out to take off the other shoe, Ata Eliyahu Hanavi came va'amale, and he said, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ishalaft acharina, if you take off the other shoe, Maharivna le'alma, I'm going to destroy the entire world. Why would that destroy the entire world? So the simple understanding is that if he took off the other shoe, it started raining. The other shoe would bring more rain. More rain would have been too much, and that would have destroyed the world. That's the simple understanding. But there's other understandings as well, that was going to be considered a chutzpah. That you see that this is the power that you have over the world. And you enacting that power when you don't need to, when it's already started to rain, is going to be a destructive force, because God, so to speak, is going to punish for the fact that we've intervened in such a way. Okay? Macharivna alma. Amar Rav Mari bere de bat Shmuel. Let's just finish this and this will end. Rav Mari, the son of Shmuel, son of the daughter of Shmuel, said once, Ana have kaimna aguda den har Papa. I was once on the bank of the Papa River. On that day, when it started to rain. Hazai le'malache, I saw angels idamu le'malache that were compared to sailors. They looked like sailors. The kamaiti chala umalunu le'arbi. They were bringing sand, and they were putting onto the boats this cargo of sand. V'havikimcha desmida, and the sand, because there was no flour during the famine, the sand miraculously turned to flour. Atu kula alma, everyone came, of course, to buy it. Limizvan, to buy, because they had they didn't have flour in the marketplace. Amalahu meha lo tizbun, don't sell from this place, don't buy from it. Dima'asen nisimu, because this flour came about through ma'asen nisim. Lemachar atyan arbe, the next day the boats came. The chiti de parzina. The next day came boats from another place, and those boats carried natural wheat from another place. This idea we already saw earlier, that the rabbis taught not to take advantage or not to benefit from a case from a miracle. And we learned that in the last sugya. We found this idea not to benefit from ma'aseh nisim. But
why was the miracle done if not to benefit?
I think that's exactly the point in the God's displeasure with the other shoe. In other words, the fact that Rabbi Yehuda was in pain, that he was, so to speak, acting in the way where he was going to go barefoot in mourning, in Shmin HaShamayim, that could not fly. The world could not deal with such a great tzaddik living in pain. So it starts to rain immediately. But think about this. The fact that it's raining now, that doesn't help for today.
Right.
You don't get wheat because it rains now. It solves the larger problem. But what happens now? What do we do now?
You have the sand.
So the sand turned to flour. But he encouraged them and said, don't take from the Ma'aseh Nisim.
So what happens to that flour?
I don't know. Doesn't say what happened to the flour.
It's a cargo ship. Maybe it
Went somewhere else. Or maybe it was sold to people who didn't know or who didn't have a witness to the Ma'aseh Nisim. I think, and I always think to myself when I remember this Gemara, that the person that ruined this for everybody is Rav Mari. Rav Mari saw what happened. But let's say Rav Mari had not seen what happened. What would have happened? This just would have been a ship with wheat,
right,
with flour. Now there's really no difference between an open miracle of sand turning to flour and flour itself. Why? Because how does flour grow? It's also sand turning to flour. You take a little seed, put it in the earth, and what did that earth turn into? Right? In both cases, you have sand turning into flour. But in one case, you don't see the process. So therefore, it's not an open miracle. It's nature. But if Rav Mari had not seen this, there would be no difference between this and the other. This flour and the other. So in a certain sense, Rav Mari ruined it, right? By having observed this process. Now, I think to myself though, God also made sure that Rav Mari was there to observe this at that exact moment. So clearly maybe that was also part of what's going on. We're going to continue Be'ezrat Hashem from here next week.
Rabbi, do you want to say the story about Dosi?
Rav Chanina Dosa. No, because it's coming up soon.
Okay.
So I wanted to point it out when we learn the Gemara. So we're gonna hit a Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa Palooza, for the next daf. So we'll kind of come to it then. Bezat Hashem. That's a sign from heaven.